In today's video, we are comparing the almighty DJI Air2S with the brand new DJI Mini 3 Pro. This has a Pro now. The Air2S has been one of our favorite drones for a long time. We've been using it for a backup camera. We've been using it as a main camera for some of our shots, or sometimes when we need to record other drones, this is the go-to that we've been using. Now, the DJI Mavic 3, which is not on this table, has kind of replaced it ever since, but this is one of our favorite. This has been one of my favorite drones for a long time. So I wanted to put it to the test, so let's get to it. Okay, so this is a video that I'm sure is going to be really interesting for a lot of people. Like I said, I don't want anybody who owns an Air2S to think that we don't like this drone. I'm going to say this already, but we wanted to compare it to this because it's a brand new drone, right? So you always want to see, this is a bit cheaper, obviously. We'll get to the price point in a minute, and we wanted to see if the capabilities were different. Also, DJI claims that this little sensor, it's not a little sensor, it's a smaller sensor, does as well as the 1-inch sensor with 20 megapixels. So we wanted to see if this was true. There's been a lot of buzz already. We posted our video on the DJI Mini 3 Pro, and a lot of people have been making comments about our testing on the Air2S. So I wanted to go a little bit more in depth and give you that information. Now, I want you to draw your own conclusions. The data that I'm going to show you is not by any means a final say as to which drone you prefer, okay? There is positive and negative on both sides. So I want you to keep that in mind. But before we get to the data in itself in terms of the image, let's talk about some of the features on these drones. And first off, the flight time. It is advertised at 30 minutes on the Air2S and 34 minutes on the Mavic 3 Pro. Now, there's also an option for 47 minutes, but I'm not going to compare that because I want to compare apples to apples. So in this case, the Mini 3 is going to win a little bit. In terms of weight, 249 right here, 595 grams on this side. In terms of speed, this is going to win. It's a bigger platform. It's got a bigger motors and bigger propellers. So that's going to do 42.5 miles per hour. And then here, 36 miles per hour on the Mini 3. In terms of sensors, for collision avoidance, we have sensors in the front right here and also sensors in the back. They're in different locations on the Mini 3. We have sensors in the front here, and the back sensors are located kind of right behind the front sensors if you want. We haven't noticed really a difference in terms of how good the sensors are depending on the placement. So we think that both of these designs have a lot of value. In terms of the flight time, we did some testing on both of these. Now, I want you to keep in mind that we are flying at higher altitude here in our studio. We tested these at an equivalent altitude of 8,000 feet and 7,700 feet. We did this on 2 different days, but we do this in a controlled environment. We actually do all of our battery testing indoors. And yes, we do battery testing as hovering, which is the lowest amount of flight time that you will get out of a battery. If you start to go forward, you will actually get better time. But since we do all of our testing hovering, then it makes sense to get some comparative information. We started at 100% with this battery. We started at 99% or 98% with this battery. We got a total flight time of 25 minutes and 25 seconds with this drone with the Air2S. That was 85% of the advertised 30 minutes of flight time. On this one, we also get close to that. We get 87% of the advertised flight time. They advertised 31 minutes, and we got 28.50. The 31 minutes, I know some of you mentioned this in our other review, 31 minutes is the advertised hovering time, 34 minutes is the advertised time in flight. So 2 different advertised time on this drone, and both of them we got over 85%, which is really, really good, by the way. Because of altitude, we don't expect to get 100%. Our drones don't last nearly as long up in the air. In terms of the noise, this has 70 decibels. This was recorded at 74 decibel. Not much of a difference. We noticed that the Mini 3 Pro sounds very quiet because it's a lower pitch because the propellers are a bit larger. Now, the propellers are also large in here, but the motors are not the same. So it's hard to compare between the two. I want to talk about the sensors. This has the 1/1.3 inch CMOS sensor with 12 megapixel, which can also be bumped to 48 megapixel with photos when you use the quad buyer technology. This has a 20 megapixel 1-inch sensor, so larger sensor, more pixels. This has lower count pixel, but lower pixel density. So we get some interesting results in terms of photos and videos. JPEG and RAW on both sides, except the difference is a fixed aperture of 2.8, a fixed aperture of 1.7 on this side. In terms of videos, they're very comparable. They will both do 4K 60 at 150 megabit per second, 2.7K up to 60 frames per second, and then 1080 up to 120 frames per second. The only difference is that the Air2S can actually record at 5.4K at 30 frames per second. So that's, if you're looking into getting 5.4K footage, bigger footage, then the Air2S is definitely something that you want to look into. Also, if you're a videographer, and I know this is why we really enjoy this drone, you have the ability to do D-Log at 10-bit or HLG at 10-bit, and then the normal mode at 8-bit. This will only record at 8-bit, and this will only do D-Cine-like and normal. There's no way to do a log footage with this. So that's a big difference. That's a big difference right here. I know we shoot everything in D-Log in the office, so this is why this drone for a long time was a great companion, because we were able to take this with us and get log footage at 10 bits. So great quality out of this drone. In terms of photos, you have the ability to do burst photos on both sides. In terms of bracketing, you have AEB on both of these drones. The only difference is that this drone does 3 and 5 images. This will do 3, 5, and 7 images. Also, this, like I mentioned, has the ability to do 48 megapixel photos, which is what they call the smart photo. This does not have the ability to do more than the 20 megapixel photos that the sensor size is. And then panoramas, both of them will do panoramas, and both of them will have zoom. Now, there's a bit of a difference here. The Mini 3 Pro will do zoom at 4K up to 2x, at 2.7K up to 3x, and then the full HD up to 4x. On the Air2S, we have a bit more of a zoom. This is all digital zoom, by the way. At 4K, you can do 4x. At 2.7K, you can do 6x. And then at 1080, you can do 8.5x. I don't like using digital zoom, but I do have to say that in flight, sometimes you want to zoom in on an object to see what it looks like, maybe get more detail instead of having to fly closer, just to get an idea of the surrounding. Then the Air2S in this case is going to be far superior for zooming in. This is also why we actually like the zoom on the Mavic 3 Cine. I know a lot of people hate that zoom, but I like it because I have the ability to go and explore and look at things using a pretty powerful zoom. Now, DJI added a bunch of different modes in here for taking photos and taking videos, including Master Shot. This is something that in the past was only available in the Air series of drones and the Pro series. Now they've added it to the Mini 3 Pro, so you can do Master Shots, you can do quick shots, all of them, including the Asteroid, which wasn't available before. And then you have intelligent flight modes. This is also new to the Mini series. You can do on both of these drones Active Track 4.0, Spotlight 2.0, and then Point of Interest 3.0. And because both of these drones actually only have sensors in the front and in the back, then there's not really that much of a difference in terms of the capabilities and sensor avoidance. So if you're really in the market, then it's going to be tough to choose between these two. And then you have hyperlapse as well you can do on both of these drones. Now, the main difference now is going to be in the pricing. And DJI came in hot. I'm going to say that for a mini drone, this is much higher than the old Mini drones have been. And if you wanted to see a comparison of this, by the way, against the Mini 2, we also have a video. I'm going to put a link up here so you can go and see that. So if you're interested in the Mini 2 instead of the Air2S, that's a good video to watch. But the Air2S as a base price, okay, base package, that's going to be $1,000, $999, okay? This with the RC remote, the new one right here, this is going to be $909, okay? This with the traditional RC N1 is going to be $1,000. So very, very similar in pricing if you get the higher option here of getting the DJI RC, which has a screen embedded into it, and it's much more advanced than just the RC N1 right here. Now, if you wanted to get just this drone with the RC N1, then it's going to be $759. So that's that's quite a bit of a discount compared to the Air2S. And then with no controller, you can actually buy this drone without a controller for $669. All right, so I'm going to let you do the math between all of these prices, but there's a difference in price. There's a difference in capabilities, of course, but there's also a big difference in price. If you wanted to add on top of this all of the Flight Mode combo, you can get a Flight Mode combo for $1,300 with the Air2S. If you add The smart controller, which is the old version, the original version of the smart controller here, that's going to be $1749. Okay, $1749. It is also available with this, and I actually don't have pricing, but you can also get the new DJI RC Pro with it, which is going to be a little bit more expensive. Now, on the other side, with the Mini 3 Pro, you can get, again, this smart controller here, which is called the DJI RC. I should use the right words. You cannot use any of these other controllers at the moment. I'm saying at the moment because DJI might change that, but at the moment, these are not supported right here. So the highest that you can go by getting a Flight Mode package is $1159, which is where you get this drone, this controller right here, and also two of the bigger batteries. So, and that still is cheaper than this drone with the Fly More combo and the RC-N1. I hope this is not too confusing. I know there's a lot of pricing options, but the bottom line is the Mini 3 Pro in most cases is going to be cheaper and providing you with more gear and more equipment. Now let's talk about the thrust. And I know some people have made comments and asked us, why do we test thrust? Well, testing thrust is actually extremely important to us because it gives us an idea of how efficient this drone is and how maneuverable it's actually going to be. The DJI Air2S is very easy to fly. It's very zippy, it flies along, and it's actually a joy to fly compared to other brands of drones. This is even better. The Mini 3 Pro, we were flying it outside when we first got it, and I was actually just kind of laughing and smiling because this thing is a ton of fun to fly, especially in sports mode. And I was just impressed at how stable the camera was when we were doing some crazy maneuvers outside. But anyway, so we test thrust for that reason, not because these are carrying drones, they don't carry anything. But at 247 grams, this is how it weighs when we tested it. It pulls 420 grams. Okay, that's a ratio of 2.7 to 1 thrust to weight ratio. This, on the other hand, at 590 gram weight, only pulls 520 grams. So it pulls less than its own weight, and that's a ratio of 1.88, which is a lot lower than this drone. This drone is a beast. It's amazing what they've been able to do with the thrust and the motors and the propellers. It is just very impressive. Now note that both of these we tested at about 8,000 feet density altitude, so at much higher altitude. You would get better results actually if you did this at lower elevation. Now let's talk about pictures. And this is an area where opinions are going to diverge. So I'm going to show you the data and I'm going to let you decide what you want to do. I'll tell you what I think and which one I would choose, but I really want you to think about and look at this, and also want you to go in the description because we're going to put links to the RAW file and the JPEG file for both of these drones. So you have the ability to download the images and see for yourself, see which one you like best. Now we did this testing. When we do photo testing, we do it in our studio and we do it using our color chart. And this color chart is printed at very high quality, so we have a ton of details. The pictures that you're going to see here are zoomed in, okay? They're taken from this big chart, and these are detailed pictures. So you have to remember that in this case, this is not just an overall image. You're going to see problems with noise, and you're going to see problem with details. And yes, these are pretty detailed shots in certain areas of our chart. And we picked these spots because we have what's called torture tests. And I love looking at this chart because it's got so many areas where the sensors are just struggling to replicate the information. So we put this in here, and I gave you a little bit of a combo between different types of ISO and different parts of the chart. Now you will notice, and I'm going to say this before we even get started, the Air2S in the center of the image is fairly sharp. When we start to get away from the center, especially when you start to look at the grassy area is not out of focus. The grassy area is just further on the edge of the chart, and we put it there on purpose because we wanted to test how accurate these lenses are and how much distortion there is in the corners and further away from the center. So you'll see that these images, they're not out of focus on the Air2S, they're just pretty good in the center. As we get away from the edges, then there's a bit more distortion. I have to say this was done without a filter. We don't put filters on our lenses unless there is one that comes with it that we can't remove, but we don't have ND filters. We don't have anything else in the front because we want to get the cleanest image as we can. And we control all the lighting in here using professional lights and then using the cyclo that's right behind me. This is where we put our testing chart. So it's getting somewhere near like 1600 watts of light that we can control individually. individually to make sure that these images come out as best as we can. So I'll shut up talking about the way that we do this, but I wanted to mention all this because some of you may be wondering how we got to these results. So looking here, the Mini 3 Pro has a bit more detail. It's a bit sharper on some of the text that we see at 1600 ISO, but you may also notice that while the Air2S is a bit softer, it also has a little bit less noise at these settings. I do also want to mention that these photos from the Mini 3 Pro are all taken at 48 megapixel. At 48 megapixel. We also have a video available that is going to show you this at 48 megapixel versus 12 megapixel because there's a world of a difference when it comes to noise, but there's also some catches at 12 megapixels. So it's not perfect, but this is kind of worst case scenario if you think about it at 48 megapixel. If we look here, this is the center of our chart, and you can see that, well, it's more difficult to find a difference between the two. The Mini 3 Pro has a bit more contrast to it. The Air2S is also a little bit, well, less contrasty. That's really what we were showing here. I don't know that there is a right or wrong image here. They're very comparable, and this is at ISO 100. At ISO 100, the big difference here that we see, this is one of the torture tests in our area. We see the top portion of the image is the Air2S and the bottom portion is the Mini 3 Pro. That area in the Air2S is very, very soft. Not a whole lot of details. The Mini 3 Pro is one of the only drones we tested that had the ability to distinguish all of these tiny, tiny, tiny horizontal lines and those diagonal lines. All the other drones seem to just look at this as one big blotch of lines, and you can't really see the detail. So the Air2S didn't underperform compared to other drones. It's just that the Mini 3 Pro in this scenario here was far superior to pretty much anything we've tested. And then we get to the grassy area. This is in the top portion of our chart. And like I said, that Air2S footage here is ISO 3200. It is not out of focus. It is just that the Air2S is a bit softer on the edges. And you can make a decision here on noise. So you kind of have a trade-off between more sharpness on the Mini 3 and then less sharpness but less noise also on the Air2S side of things. In this big CYM section here, we like to do this to see color accuracy. These photos were all taken with a manual white balance of 5600. This is the color of the lights that we use in the studio. And this is at 1600, and you can see the difference in noise here is pretty obvious between the two drones. And this is what I call the barcode area. This is a little bit at the bottom of our chart in the center. And then here you can see the Air2S being softer, especially on that top row. You can see that the Mini 3 Pro is a bit sharper on these images and also a bit darker in terms of the colors. I do have to say, when you look at darker colors on these comparative footage, it's often difficult for us to get the lighting exactly the same from one camera to the next. So I don't want you to make too much of this. This is especially for you to compare the sharpness and to compare the noise level between the two. The contrast may be a little bit different just because of the lighting that we use. I do have to mention the Mini 3 Pro at the very bottom line, right in the center, there is some artifacts that appear. This is at 48 megapixel. It had a hard time not putting some purple in the middle of all of these tiny little squares. The Air2S did pretty good at this, and we did not see that artifact. This is the only spot in that barcode area where consistently the Mini 3 Pro was adding purple artifact at the bottom. And then we went up in the air. Comparing video is also very difficult, something that's actually hard to do in this chart in the studio because it doesn't move. So what we did is we took the drones onto our Octozilla, we call it the aircraft carrier. We have the ability to put all of these drones on a tray that's stabilized and then turn the drones on and record the same footage during the same flight. So you get footage that's extremely well, comparable because it was shot at the same time with the same light. And what you'll notice, sometimes there is a bit of a shake. It's more from our drone rather than the shake from the drone in itself. It's from our Octozilla that's shaking a little bit. So if you notice some imperfections there, that's what it is. But it still is a great way to compare the two qualities. As this video is playing, you can see here this is a very slow forward motion. I have a hard time telling you which one is best. Even by looking and pausing and looking at details, they're both the same sharpness, they're both the same look. And you see there's a lot of trees in here. Maybe on one side we get a little bit less details. I think on the Mini 3 Pro side we have a little bit less detail, but here on this shot, the trees seem to be about the same sharpness, hardly a difference in color. We did use the same white balance in this case. And then here in the mountains, it's also very difficult to see a difference between those two shots. So I think you're going to be hard pressed when you look at videos to see a difference. This is at 4K, by the way, 4K 30 frames per second. We didn't test it obviously at 5.3K because 5.4K because we don't have the ability to do that on the other drone. Now, even in this footage here, this was not done with Octozilla. This was just shot manually on both sides. So there's a bit of a discrepancy in the speed of rotation, but you can see it's just a color difference, quite frankly, between the two. Now on the left side here, the Air2S was set in full auto mode, so was the Mini 3, including auto white balance. Now this is not the case here. These two were shot at the same white balance. The drone is not moving here. This is a stationary shot on the ground, and then here is a close-up. All this is done at 4x in post-processing. Again, very difficult to see difference. You might see some things in here that you prefer, but maybe a little bit softer on the Air2S side, but that's also post-processing, I think, done on the Mini 3. So I think you would be hard-pressed here to really make a decision between the two, which is kind of good news in a sense. If you have an Air2S, it may not be worth it to upgrade, or I don't even know if it's an upgrade, but to change to the Mini 3. If you don't have a drone, then maybe the Mini 3 is for you because it's a tad bit cheaper. And so it really depends on what you're in the market for. In terms of photos, I think it's pretty obvious. In terms of videos, it's a lot less obvious based on our testing. So this is it. This is all the information I have. As always, like I said, go down in the description because we put that raw footage, that comparative video. I'm also going to put a link so you can download the full video so it's not compressed by YouTube and having different things. It's just exported straight format from the drone footage that we picked. So if you have comments, I know you have a lot of comments on this Mini 3 Pro. Leave them down in here. We'll do our best to answer your questions. We have more videos coming out of this, so make sure you check out the channel. Make sure you subscribe so we can put out more cool content for you. And this is it. That's all I have. We'll see you in the next video.